Okay, number 4 for social psychology is conformity and deviance. This is my favorite area. This is what I basically got my PhD in, especially deviance, but we'll come back to that. When I talk about conformity, I have the hammers from Pink Floyd here. We're going to hammer you into submission, make you be like everyone else, one size fits all. And to keep on the hammer analogy, this is a Chinese proverb, I think. The nail that sticks out the farthest gets hammered the hardest. So if you're flamboyant and stick out in society and look different, you get hammered on. And it reminds me of The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I don't know if you saw that movie, but if you're flamboyant, you get hammered. Okay, so here we go. Sheeple. What are sheeple? Sheep people. And so there is, the perks of being a wallflower. You blend in, you know what I mean? You kind of like go with the other sheep, and that's what I'm going to talk about at first. But then I'm going to come back over here and talk about this guy and talk about how, you have different consequences for not acting like the rest of the sheep. Now, when I talk about tribes, I could talk about the bigger society, and sorry about the Native American thing here, because like you have a tribe, probably a clique that you hang out with, and I'm talking about conformity and deviance a lot of times in these littler tribes, not in the bigger tribe. It could be the bigger tribe, but also in the littler tribe. Now, the first theory that I have is from Biblat name, multiplication of impact. Basically, what he says is this: as a group grows, they have more impact on an individual. As the group is growing, their impact is multiplied on the individual. Hopefully that makes sense. It's pretty simple, right? Now, I don't usually like to talk about this part of the theory. I usually like to talk about the reverse part of the theory. That as a group grows in size, something else happens: division of impact. What does that mean? The individual has less and less impact on each one of the members. Now, this doesn't always happen to Adolf Hitler or cult leaders, whatever, but a lot of times as a crowd gets bigger and bigger and bigger, I can't control them as much. One of the examples they use is tipping studies. Like when people come in and sit at your table in a small crowd, you get a bigger tip per person than in a bigger crowd because it's distributed across the crowd. The other idea that I really like, I don't think I have this on here, is from preachers. They would follow around preachers and they would find that preachers are more impactful when they preach in smaller settings than in larger settings. And how do they measure that? How many people come down to give their life to Christ, etc. And the idea is in a bigger setting, it feels like I'm just anonymous in the group, but in a smaller setting, they're preaching right to me. This is why I preach at Scottsdale Community College. Okay, so let me get off of this one. Ash in 1951 did a very famous experiment. It's so easy. He would make you look at lines. He would say, look at this line over here. Now these three over here, pick the one that's the same size. Well, I'm going to tell you right now it's this one because I made it that one. That's all you have to do. 18 different times. Not the same one, of course, but 18 different ones. Now, because it's social psychology, they would put you with actors. Remember actors? And you would be the accomplices. I actually wrote it on here. Real guys. So here's you. And these guys are all actors. They put one actor after you, I guess, to make it seem like it's not completely phony. Now, what happens is, see, these guys are going to put pressure on you, multiplication of impact. I can get off of this one. So a lot of times it's like easy to pick out which one is right. You know what I mean? And other times it's like, I don't know. Okay, but here's what they would do. Out of the 18 times, I'm not going to ask you the numbers for the test. 12 times out of these 18 times, the group starts fucking with this guy. They go, okay, which one is it? And they start going, 1. Yep, it is 1. It is 1. It is 1. It is 1. Now it's your turn. Now, at first you might go, wait a minute. There's no way it can be 1, can it? Let me get all this off of here. It's like, but eventually what they find is that in the group, 75%, 3 out of 4 people would say the wrong answer at least once, and sometimes all of the times. Now you know that you're saying the wrong answer. So now it begs the question, if I come back to this, why do people conform in this situation? Deutsch and Girard give two reasons we might conform. Number one is normative, that's kind of like normal. And sometimes this is known as a compliance. I fake it. I just do what I'm told. I don't believe in it. The second kind is informational, and informational influence, focus on information, because I really believe, internalize, that the group has the truth. It's true. So if I can get my thing off of here, one of the examples I usually use is Adolf Hitler. And so a lot of people were faking it. Why? Because if you don't fake it in Nazi Germany, you're going to get it. So even if you don't believe in him, you don't start talking shit about Adolf Hitler. You pretend like Mein Kampf is great, even if you think it sucks, this, that, and the other. But other people really believe in that. They're totally buying into it. Think about Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Basterds at the very first. I wish I was in class. I could talk about it all day long. But anyway, if you think back to the study then that I just mentioned, I think most people were faking it. They were doing this one up here. They don't really believe that that line is the same length as the other one. Why? Because when they did it alone, almost 100% of the people got them right. You know what I mean? So in a group setting, all of a sudden you get them wrong, but alone you get them right. So this says that they're faking it. Okay, so the last study in this area is Schachter, 1951. I call it a jury study. Why? Because you have people being a jury. But of 8 people, I don't know why not 12. And they put 3 fake people in the jury. Remember, actors? And here they are. One of the guys, I say, always conform. Whatever the group says, you say the same thing. So this is the sheeple. One guy, I say, never conform. That's the deviant. And then the guy in the middle right here, he starts off against the group, but then he goes along with the group. Flip-flopper. Okay, so always conforms, never conforms, starts off against, then with. Okay, this is the way I usually show it in class. Okay, so here's the real people over here. What they find with the real people is they don't really talk to this guy right here. When they look at communication, they don't talk to him. Not because they're not friendly to him, because he already believes. It's like if you show up to church and you already believe in Jesus, why are they talking to your ass? You know what I mean? They talk a lot to these two guys. They're not believers. If they're all saying guilty and these 2 people are saying not guilty, there's a problem. Houston, we have a problem. And these 2 guys are the problem. Now, I've told this guy, once the pressure gets on, flip-flop. And so now he says, okay, y'all are right, guilty, I was wrong, and y'all are right, I see the error of my ways. But now the group still talks to this guy over here. And what does Schachter find? Eventually, they see he's a lost cause, and they ghost his ass and don't talk to him no more. It's like, okay, you're done. Ghosting sucks, dude, but it's this form of rejection. And so I don't know if you had to watch this movie before. It's an old movie, but Henry Fonda is saying not guilty, the rest are saying guilty, but one at a time he brings them over. But it's this one guy right down here, because of his son, doesn't want to come off this guilty verdict, and then they break him. That's the end of that particular movie. Okay, so moral of the story, if you go along with the group and act like a good sheep, then you get rewarded. And if you act like a bad sheep, you get punished. Now, punishment can just be ghosting, but rejection can be a lot of things. Verbal abuse, physical abuse, think about bullying, even torture and death, if I went into all this stuff from our religion class, because I do talk about that over there. Forgot I had this on here. Like, the Catholic Church. Oh, you're a heretic. Well, let's get you on the rack. But even if you think about the ultimate form of rejection, because I teach religion, it's like everybody goes, oh, a cross is so sweet. It's like, no, the cross was the ultimate form of torture. You know what I mean? If you do something wrong, and if you were rolling into Rome, it's like, hey, look, you see all those crucifixes? That means if your ass gets out of line, we're going to put you on there. So it was like this ominous thing, not this thing like Tim wears around his neck right here. I hope that section made sense. Okay, the very last topic is deviance. It's my topic. This is what I majored in, basically. Try to tell that to your parents and see how they react. Anyway, I have Mr. Marilyn Manson on here. I love him. You might not like him, but he says, what is his job? Pissing people off. I like people that take a big stick and whack a hornet's nest because it needs to shake society up. Everybody gets in this status quo and then everything's comfortable. And if you have a lot of money and everything else, of course it's great, you know what I mean? But society needs to be shooken up. And one of the people I talk about with shaking society up is Socrates. He was put to death for going against society. Here was the accusation in Plato's Apology. Socrates is guilty of corrupting the youth. You don't have to remember this for the test. But this is the accusation. This is what gets him in trouble. You know, he's raising hell, teaching about gods and other things that the state doesn't approve of. And he makes this claim. There's no man in Athens or anywhere else that's going to live for very long if you firmly oppose the multitude. I mean, I'll get into my heroes later, but just think about the heroes throughout history, you know, the Martin Luther Kings, the people that stand up to the multitude, they get shot down, right? And so he says as his last request, I want you to remember me as a gadfly to a horse. And what is that? A horsefly to a horse. But the horse is big and well bred and sluggish because of its size, and so it needs to be woken up. And so I'm the gadfly, he's saying. I'm this gnat or this horsefly that's buzzing around the horse, and you're going to have to find another one once I'm gone, because otherwise the horse just gets fat and lazy and never changes anything about itself. Why? Because it's the horse. The majority always has the power. But he says the role of deviance in the minority is to rise up against the horse. This is why Tim loves it. I want to start going off, because like this fly that buzzes around the horse is Socrates, and it makes the horse have to change. And a lot of times you say, well, I don't know, it's such a small element of society, it will never make a change. And I think I have this quote on here from the Dalai Lama. It says, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. It makes a big difference in your tent at night, doesn't it? And so you can make a difference. In the same way the mosquito pesters you, you pester society into changing. Okay, so come back to this. Here's the average, the norm. Why is it in the middle? Because it's the average. Like if the test average was 70, some people might make 100 and some people might make 5, but those are extreme scores, right? I'm a statistician by nature. And so, anyway, we have these cutoffs, both good and bad. At some point we go, dude, you're way extreme. If we were in statistics, those are how many standard deviations out are we going to consider extreme. Okay, but let's not get into all that. I just certain behaviors like good and evil. Some people are extremely good. You might not, like the Jesus analogy or the devil analogy, but we're in the middle probably, most of us, Maybe we border on sainthood or devilhood, one way or the other, but most of us are in the middle. And this got me to conformity and deviance. Now, if I call you a conformist, that's a bad thing. But as I also call you a deviant, that's a bad thing. So some conformity is good, like we conform to driving on the right-hand side of the road or stopping at, a red light. Those are good things. But a lot of conformity that I'll mention is bad conformity, just like Socrates is trying to break a bad horse. And Socrates is up here. My heroes, Martin Luther King, the other ones that I'll talk about, they're coming down here and saying society is bad. It needs to be changed, and we're going to be the mosquito or the fly that changes it. But see, you have this other last element right here I call the knuckleheads. And this element are people that just fuck up a perfectly good thing. And my best example of this, if you think one person can't change the world, this one motherfucker changed the world, the shoe bomber. The guy that got on the plane with the fucking shoe on and a string out of the back of it, and then all of a sudden, since then, everybody has to take their shoes off from here to eternity for the rest of time because of one person. One person changed the world. So if one person can change the world in this bad way, if my pen is still on here, then one person can change the world in this good way. You don't have to remember this part for the test, but I love talking about it because it's like, how do gadflies try to change bad horses like Socrates was doing? And how do knuckleheads fuck up perfectly good horses? These are just Tim's opinions, but I'll give you some like examples. Okay, gadflies. Again, you don't have to remember any of these. But Martin Luther in 1517, yes, he goes to the church door at Wittenberg and he nails 95 things to the door that he doesn't like about the Catholic Church. Well, that's not smart. They have all kinds of things they can do to you in the Inquisition. They can hurt you really bad. He had to go into hiding for a while. Eventually, at the Diet of Worms, I think 1546, whatever, he had to stand up and defend his position, but you don't have to get into all that. The idea is he was protesting the Catholic Church, and this protest led to Protestants or Protestants, and one of the first kind of Protestants is Lutheran. Deviance, Protestant. Okay, so Copernicus in 1543, he publishes his book arguing that the sun is the center, not the earth. The sun is the center of the solar system. It's like, oh, wait a minute, the Catholic Church doesn't preach that, but this is the beginning of the scientific revolution, according to a lot of people. If he didn't bite the horse would have never changed. My third example here is Christopher Columbus. It's not always the best example. We used to think that you would sail right off the edge of the earth, but he says, no, you can circumnavigate the globe. I'm going to go all the way around to India. That's why we call people Indians here. They're really indigenous or Native American, but we call them Indians because of this knucklehead. Okay, so that's a good and a bad example too. Okay, so one of my favorite guys to talk about is Henry David Thoreau. He talks about if you want to break a law, do it in a civil way. That you should break certain laws, but do it in a civil way. And the best gadfly to me of all time, I have her picture right on my desk, is Miss Rosa Parks. All she did is one simple act. The rule was if the bus is packed and a white person gets on the bus and you're black and you have a seat, you have to give your seat up. And she says, no, no. And she goes to jail. And while she's in jail, her friends go and beg a local preacher, a young new preacher, to come down and get her out. And he does, and his name is Martin Luther King Jr. Ooh-wee! And this is 1955. Don't get Tim started. Just 50 years later, we have Obama in office, even if you hate his guts. Like back then, he couldn't even ride the bus. Just 50 years, one person changed a horse, a mosquito. Okay, so here we go. I can get off of this one. Gandhi. There was this thing called Raj, British rule of imperialism in Mother India, and he took the whole thing down with his mouth and his actions. He went to jail, and so he was doing this in a civil way. He was able to take down the Raj. Okay, so same thing with Martin Luther King Jr. If you were in class, I get into the Jim Crow laws and how he talked about these things and his speech at Selma. I could go off for hours on this stuff. But he says if you break a law because of your conscience, then in reality you're expressing the highest respect for the law. This is like stage 6 of Kohlberg's morality. You follow your heart, not what the government is saying to you. And so this is what they did, and they took a beating. They took a beating. It's like they didn't have guns or anything else. They went out there and just took it, took one for the team. And so this is why they're my heroes. Okay, there are unfortunately some knuckleheads out there too. Just think about it though. We kind of have a fascination with them. Jesse James, Billy the Kid, or even modern day. I'm fascinated with serial killers for some reason. Why do they do it? Why are they different? Or if you think about, I think I have this on here, this modern, striking back at the horse in violent ways, militia movements. I don't know if you remember Timothy McVeigh. And like how he did this whole thing based on the Turner Diaries and white supremacy, and he was whatever. So think about these two guys. God, it's been so long ago. 420. It's like when they shot up Columbine 1999. Wow, is that a long time ago? And think about how many school shootings have been since then. People get mad at the horse and they try to change it, but in the wrong way. So, unfortunately, then it changes our school system and how we teach and all kinds of stuff because the way people are knuckleheads out there in society and won't just be right. Now, I think I have this on here. Sometimes people are both. Like, if you think about it, sometimes people are both the gadfly and the badfly. All these famous musicians, that I could bring into play. These tortured artists where they're geniuses, but they're crazy as shit at the same time. And I have a few examples. Edgar Allan Poe, genius, but crazy as shit. Vincent van Gogh, most of us, when we break up with our girlfriend, don't lop her ear off and mail it to her. You know what I mean? It's like we don't go crazy, but if they weren't that crazy, I think if we medicated these people with big pharma, then they wouldn't paint or write any books. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reason that they were good, is their insanity. And so Billie Holiday, I love Billie Holiday, but I really love her because she's in a way so heartbroken and insane, and she was a heroin addict and all this other stuff, that she had problems with. Jack Kerouac, extreme alcoholic, but one of the big figures in the beatnik movement. Ernest Hemingway, known as one of the greatest American authors. Papa Hemingway shot himself in the face. Philip K. Dick, I forgot to have him on here. I love him. He used to hang out in Oakland all the time, I think, just doing crystal meth and just writing, in his little shitty apartment or house. And so he would write all these manuscripts. I mean, some of them one was up to 6,000 pages. And so as he started to die, when he died, people got a hold of him. And so a lot of them were kind of paranoid because of the crystal meth and this, that, and the other. But as they started to get a hold of them, they were really good, and they started to make them into movies, and it totally changed the face of science fiction. Minority Report, Adjustment Bureau, Blade Runner, Total Recall, Paycheck, A Scanner Darkly over here, on and on and on. They just all got made into movies at a certain period of time where just like he had a stronghold on the science fiction community, even though he was already dead. But all these movies have that component of I'm on the run. Who am I? I don't know who I am, right? It's kind of paranoia. That's the genius behind a lot of his writings. Now, this is Hunter S. Thompson. Speaking of insanity, he says, I hate to advocate drugs, alcohol, violence, or insanity to anyone, but they've always worked for me. Okay, so maybe you know about Forever 27 Club. These people that died at a really young age. Here's a few of them. It makes me so sad to see Amy Winehouse. I love her. She's so fucking awesome. Her music, though, wouldn't be nearly as good, if she wasn't so insane. Like, if you've ever seen the documentary, at the very first of her documentary about her life, it says, I think if I ever got famous, it would kill me. And that's exactly what happened to her. But really, it was her crack addiction, her alcoholism, and really her addiction to that guy that she just couldn't get the love from that she wanted. Now, another category that's hard for me to talk about besides musicians and their duality with being geniuses but tortured is comedians. Oh my God, love Robin Williams. I identify with him so much. He's so awesome. And so, anyway, I could go off on comedians right here, but I won't. Now, the last thing I usually talk about is the Damascus effect, because Saul from the Bible wasn't always Saul. He changed his name to Paul after he got blinded here on the road to Damascus, and St. Paul wrote most of the New Testament. He used to persecute people of God, and then he became a fervent, carrier and minister, apostle, if you will. He's not really an apostle, but he's an apostle, basically. And so he was a bad fly, and then something happened right here, and then he became a gadfly. I talk about these conversion experiences in my religion class all the time. And so, this is what happened to me. Like in Peru, I got smacked on the head. Now, I love this quote from Lao Tzu. If you do not change directions, you may end up where you are heading. You have to think about that one for a minute. Okay, so Malcolm X, he was heading in the wrong direction, but then eventually he went to prison, and then he got headed in the right direction with Islam. When he came out of prison, he was a changed man. And so he carried a different kind of message than before and after prison. You see what I'm talking about? Tookie Williams is a famous guy. He was the founder of the Crips, but that's what he's not what he's most famous for. He went to death row for the murder, I think, of 7 people. And on death row, he did something you shouldn't probably do in prison. Renounce all gang ties. You know what I mean? Because now you're an enemy of the enemies and your former gang. And so in prison, he started to write all these books that were targeted towards high-risk youth about don't get into gangs and here's why. And eventually, Tookie Williams was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize before he was put to death. And so it's crazy, that he can change his life from being a really bad fly to a really good fly. I don't think he did it just for the attention or this, that, or the other. I think he had a true experience within prison, which would be a conversion experience. Okay, this is how I usually end my class, and it sucks that we're not in person because I come back to this word psychology. Remember the first time we met? Psych, P-S-Y-C-H, psyche. Psyche had to go to hell to earn her wings. She didn't become a goddess until she first went to hell, right? Remember I talked about this? And it's like, this is the one thing I want you to remember about me is the iceberg. That sometimes you got to go to hell, and maybe not physical hell, but this psychological hell to deal with the demon that's been torturing you, Tim, so that you can come back again. I didn't talk a lot about the hero's journey in this class, to share that with the world because your hell is what you use to liberate other people that are suffering. And so August Wilson right here says, confront the dark parts of yourself and work to banish them with illumination and forgiveness. I need to listen to this because my willingness to wrestle with these demons is causing my angels to sing. Hopefully some angels started singing in my class. So the 2 most important days of your life, I told you the first time I met you, are the day you're born and also the day you find out why. I'm here for this day right here. I'm here to teach about this day all fucking day. Is the day you find out why. See, these 2 questions have always plagued me. Who am I and why am I here? The day you find out why. I used to ask a lot of people and try to make up a lot of fancy reasons. And one day I was given actually this speech, and it dawned on me I always knew when I was a little kid and I couldn't even read and write, I knew. You know why? Because I went around singing it to everybody. I said, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. You're here to be a light worker, nothing more and nothing less. And so when I talk about shining, there's been a lot of moments when my light was snuffed out. But people always came along, it seemed like right at the right time and lit me up. Somebody that had the light. And what Buddha says is that when I light your candle with mine, it doesn't take any flame away from my candle. It just makes the room twice as bright. Okay, so here's my problem too with Christian theology sometimes. People's like, I got saved. It's like, well, that's like musical chairs. I got my chair. The music stopped. Too bad for you. It's like, no, if you get the light, get saved. That's the beginning. That's why I go into Matthew 25. It's like Jesus says, this thing right here, neither does a man light a lamp and put it under a bushel. I got saved. See, my light is lit. It's like he puts it on a candlestick so it gives light to all in the house and spreads out all throughout the house. Okay, so I'm fixing to show a movie about this, and then I'll come back and talk about it a little bit more. But I want to be that city on a hill, that light that people can see within the darkness.
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
I love this thing. It's so amazing because one of the things I want to do is be a Bodhisattva. This comes from a Buddhist tradition. A Bodhisattva is somebody that's been liberated from his or her suffering and could go ahead and choose to leave because they're done now, or they could stay here and liberate everybody else. And so a Bodhisattva chooses to stay behind and liberate others even though they've been liberated. And that's what I think your job is to be, too, is to be a Bodhisattva. That's what I want to be. And so when I really think about my suffering, because the Buddhists talk a lot about suffering, a lot of times it's 3 in the morning. It's like, why the fuck do I suffer? And then I remember it dawns on me. It's my cupboard. I know exactly why I suffer. It's right here. It's where I grew up. It's like I can't let it go sometimes. And I just don't understand why I have to be born in this cupboard and get thirsty and then don't get the love and attention I need. And then I remember, see, if I didn't get born in that cupboard, if I didn't get born in that fishbowl, I wouldn't have the blessing of talking to you right now. I just would never know you. Because, see, I wouldn't have gotten my PhD in psychology because I was so fucked in the head. And I wouldn't have pushed so hard against my parents. And I wouldn't have tried to come through and understand family dynamics. And I wouldn't have had any ammunition, any hell, any demon to share with you. And I'm here to tell you, you might have grown up in this cupboard too, but I'm here to tell you there's a better one. And I hope I'm the beginning of it. I love you. I wish I was there in person to see you. I'll see you next time.